Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first Reverse the Verse of 2019. Reverse the Verse Live, Alpha 3.5, talky jabby with Todd Papy. Todd, how you doing?
Hello. Doing well.
If you don't know, I'm a content manager for Global Video Production, Jared Huckabee, and RTV is the show where at the end of our week, we go live here on twitch.tv/Star Citizen and answer questions from you, the Star Citizen community, usually about a specific topic. Occasionally we have a show like today where we are going to cover a rather broad range of topics, but all related to either the game today or development of Alpha 3.5. So, Todd, for those of them who have never tuned in before, we always assume that this is somebody's first show. Why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you do for Star Citizen?
I am the PU live game director. So basically dealing with the releases and dealing with basically features that are associated with any of our live releases, and making sure that it hits Tony, Chris, Aaron's vision of of what the game is supposed to be, and then also dealing with other feature teams that might have other aspects that are global between the two games or the two projects. So things like AI, I'm right now that's kind of in my wheelhouse and focusing on the teams and making sure that that's running smoothly.
Right, and of course, whenever somebody in my department, GBP here, has a question about some aspect of the game, you're usually the person that we come to for that kind of stuff. You are central to a lot of Star Citizen's development, and we certainly appreciate you making yourself available to us for things
Thank you.
this.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a lot of questions. This week's question thread was one of the most active ones that we've had in a while, and maybe that's just because we've been off the air for almost 2 months here. I did enjoy a lovely 30-day vacation, which was
I'm jealous.
It was amazing. I was going to come back.
Very jealous.
I thought about coming back and just doing a show with nothing but my vacation photos, but I figured people would rather hear answers to Star Citizen questions instead. Let's hope I'm right. Let's just get right to it. Of course, these questions were submitted on Spectrum, our communication platform available at robertspaceindustries.com, where people submitted questions and then voted on which ones they wanted to see answered most. Throughout the course of the broadcast, you can submit new questions, both on Spectrum and in Twitch chat. To do so, please preface your question with the word question in capital letters surrounded by brackets. That'll help our community management team pull it out from all the detritus of other conversation going on and send them on to me. For instance, let's just start with one from the live chat right now. Right off the bat, it says, Todd, what is going to be the biggest technical challenge of Alpha 3.5?
Biggest technical challenge of Alpha 3.5.
Is it making a planet entirely covered by man-made structures?
Yeah, dealing with making that look good.
Making that look good?
I mean, right now they've been working on that for a while. So I think there's nothing in there right now that scares us. But obviously then there's just the tech challenges of getting missions up and working over there, getting the content working, getting no-fly zone, which is different than no-fly zone at Hurston working, and just the technical challenges of building a city planet, and then from there were graphical improvements that they wanted to improve on like the day-night cycle and how the planet glows at night, just like a city does versus, the countryside kind of thing. So working out those types of things. Right.
This week's ATV had a feature with Luan from the UK Environment team. One of the things that we were discussing, it didn't make it into the show, we're going to have it in a segment later on, was the glows. You mentioned the glows.
Yeah.
Getting that Hurston doesn't have to emanate its own light. It does from Lorville, but not on a planet-wide scale. So figuring out how a planet can emanate that light without building a million light sources that just kill our GPUs is an interesting challenge.
And it's the transition too. So it's basically what we showed at SITCon 2 years ago, like that to me was kind of canned, meaning we knew what the establishing shot was going to be from that space station, versus once it goes live, then the planet's rotating.
Right.
So therefore you're going to be dealing with the twilight zone and that transition.
All right, so you mentioned the no-fly zone. That came up quite a few times in the question thread and after yesterday's ATV. So let's go to the most upvoted question from the question thread right now. It says, will you be able to explore all of ArcCorp by ship, or will it mostly be restricted to a no-fly zone except for Area 18?
It depends on what you consider restricted. So the idea behind it is that we have a minimum flight height for the planets, just because it's a city planet, and in particular the way that we're building things, it makes sense, from a lore standpoint. Like, you just want to be able to land anywhere. One of the tech things that we are building is the ability to have that planet wide and then be able to have kind of minus zones, so basically subtraction areas. We will have buildings that extend above the no-fly zone, so you'll still be able to weave between those and fly around, and then you'll also be able to land on those buildings. In the future, we're working on being able to actually enter into those buildings and have meaningful kind of like outpost combat or outpost missions associated with going in there and dealing with whatever is put in front of you.
Right. We were actually talking about this a little bit before we went live. Today, in 2019, you can't take a Cessna and fly anywhere you want over Los Angeles or New York or Frankfurt or whatnot. In civilized society, suburban society, there are flight restrictions. There are places where you can fly. There are places where you can land. And when one extrapolates that out 1,000 years from now into the timeline of Star Citizen, where everybody has a Cessna essentially is flying around, you have to imagine those restrictions have to be more stringent in that regard. And then when you're talking about a planet that's covered in society, structures, man-made structures and stuff like that, it has to be an interesting challenge in balancing what realistically makes sense for the society, in fiction, because we love to make everything diegetic and in lore and in fiction. Technical needs, and then of course, for gameplay purposes, griefing, people not just crashing ships into everybody running around down below and stuff.
And the reason why we didn't have to create this with Levski is obviously because everything is encapsulated, and you're where you land, the hangars and everything like that. There's nothing that's open air. But that's obviously the problem with Lorville, is that that's open air, and theoretically people could crash. And from a gameplay experience, running around these social areas and then all of a sudden, ships raining down on you, you're being shot. Nobody wants to experience that. So that's why we worked on the no-fly zone. There's still a lot of stuff that we feel we need to do in order to improve it and make it better. But now we need to take it to a planet level and move it that way.
Gotcha. Now that's not to say that every planet is going to be this. Every planet's not covered head to toe in man-made structures and stuff like that.
I think even when we talk about like Lorville, or we talk about these planets, and when we build like villages or towns or these outposts that are around there, like those don't have no-fly zones. It would be the major landing zones have that.
Gotcha. When ArcCorp is introduced in Alpha 3.5, is ArcCorp the only landing zone we're expecting, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Area 18 is the only.
Area 18.
Sorry.
Yes.
Area 18, yes.
Area 18. They will start with A. Plus, it's 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
Okay. Switching gears here, can we have more info on those automated gimbal mounts that are mentioned in the roadmap?
So right now we're doing experiments. We're playing around with it to basically get rid of a lot of the leading or follow pips. Basically, when you have different weapons that would have different pips. This is a way for us to unify the system. So it's about staying on the tail, and it's more about kind of keeping them in the center of your screen, and then over time, those weapons will converge, and then you'll be able to fire.
Right. And we're going to have a feature on ATV for that in a couple weeks, if I remember my schedule correctly. Trying to keep track of 12, the entire quarter schedule. I think we got, it's 3 or 4 weeks until we're scheduled to have a segment on the automatic gimbal mount. So look forward to that, and you'll see it with images, and it'll make a lot more sense for you.
Yeah, we just saw like the first iteration on Tuesday.
Yes.
And so I think part of it is just going to be the playing, the balancing, the adjusting, making sure that we have the parameters work, making sure that nothing feels too overpowered and balanced. So that will be one of the main things besides IFCS 2.0 that we focus on in PTU.
Right. Yeah, I saw it in the same meeting. I'm giving Kirk some time to get it into better shape before we show it. All right, from the live chat, this is a question. I have this question, but it doesn't come. It actually came in the live chat. It says, "For the love of all things holy, are there any plans to increase the friends list capacity? I have to remove a friend every time I want to add somebody new."
That's a good question. I can have Kirk take a look at that.
Okay.
We can see if it's a technical limitation or if it's just some arbitrary number that we just put there. So
yeah, what's the limit right now? I think it's not 250.
I don't know off the top of my head.
I don't know off the top of my head. I know mine filled up a while back though.
I don't have that many friends, which is okay.
Yeah. Well, there was a time a while back when it was implemented. I got a bunch of friend requests on Spectrum, and I just went sure, and I just accepted all of them, and that was a mistake on my part.
Yeah, I can just check and make sure that there's no technical limitations for that or anything like that.
Yeah, I think it was like 250 because I got a lot in there before it filled up.
Okay.
So, okay, what else we got? More than 90% of Lorville. Okay, this person claims more than 90%, but it's a lot. More than 90% of Lorville remains unexplorable on foot. Do you plan to add more locations?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want?
I mean, it's
expand on that.
Expand on that. So, basically, what we have in the schedule is, from an internal perspective, is working on villages, working on towns, and building out the planets. Right now, again, what we do is we put out a first iteration on a planet, and then from there, it's about continuing to build, the tech and build the way that we do things. So a lot of the way that we're doing our space stations now, which is what we consider a modular building set, we will take that and put that on the towns. But we need to make sure that the tech gets built up a little bit more. And there's obviously there's other space stations that we want to build as well. So we're going to focus on that, and then from there, the team will roll onto towns and obviously derelicts, outposts, underground bunkers, so on and so forth. So yes, that is the plan. It's just time and resources.
Those are always the two, aren't they?
Yeah.
Even with 500 people worldwide, there are still finite resources.
Yeah, exactly.
No. This one might be a little too granular for you. It seems like it's down at the QA level, but it says ladders are too grabby. Currently, if you get close to a ladder, it grabs you and is very hard to get off of. Will this be fixed?
Yes. Basically, we are going through all of our FPS experience and looking at how many frames it takes to do an animation, how many frames does it take to get in and out of certain things. Then there's obviously the ladders. We know the issues with them. We want to fix them. It will just come down to priorities again, So I think from our standpoint, there's like the core FPS experience and making sure that that's working and that's feeling good, and the core movement of everything and making sure. And then from there, it will go into the secondary movements like crouch and prone, ladders, mantling, vaulting, so on and so forth. And the idea is that we just kind of keep on sweeping through those and improving them.
I don't know why you were talking. I was just picturing a giant like Donkey Kong style level, nothing but ladders, ladder gameplay. Just three-dimensional.
It feels like the Caterpillar right now, or Starfarer.
There you go. From the live chat, it says, any chance to have other respawn zones around Hurston and ArcCorp?
Yes. So one of the things that you guys will see on a future kind of schedule update is cargo depots, or basically ports. And so we will be adding those to the outside of outside of planets, very much like what Port Alisar is. But then from there, the thought process is going through and saying, all right, is there a town? Okay, does that town have a hotel? Maybe you can stay there, kind of thing.
The next question we actually got a number of times. It was voted up in a number of places. I'm just going to combine them all into one here. What can we expect in regards to co-op mission support or expanded details on the group system improvements? Basically, what are we working on to make group gameplay more?
That one is a little bit on there's the FOIP and VoIP stuff and the group system things that we're trying to fix towards 3.5, which are more like quality of life improvements and making sure that it's as bug free as we possibly can. Then there's like the mission sharing and other reward sharing aspect that to me is going to happen a little bit further down the line. And so we're in discussions on how that should work with Tony and Paul Rendell and myself and basically Luke Presley, our lead live guy. And so, how that will work with the missions and even just reward sharing in general. Do I want to pay you a certain amount for your services in my crew, kind of thing.
Right. And if you want to know more about the intention there, check out Calling All Devs from December of last year. It was either the last episode we did or the one before that with Luke Presley. Long discussion about a design that went through and he was approved by Tony Z about tier 0 of group sharing and mission reward sharing and stuff like that. Much further detail there. We don't want to spend the time just regurgitating the same information here, but you should check that out. It was a good discussion. All right. How big is Area 18, and will it have a public transport system like Lorville?
It will have a public transport system. Basically, there's been some adjustments to the actual overall size, so I don't have the dimensions offhand. But
show them with your hands. Are we like this big, this big, this big?
Yeah. I would say it's probably similar size to Lorville, if not a little bit bigger. I think, but obviously we've got the spaceport, and that will be in a separate location, and then basically commuting from the spaceport over to the city. That will be kind of the form of public transportation. And then once you're in the city, then it's just walking.
Gotcha. Is it going to be a train on rails, or like it is in Lorville?
No, we've flying.
You're gonna fly through the city?
Yeah.
Space trains?
Flying bus, I think.
Flying bus?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. With people utilizing atmospheric combat, will there be parachutes in the game for when people eject so you don't just fall to your death? Probably one of the most recurring questions we get.
Yes, there will be. But since we're focused on S42 right now, you don't have that gameplay in S42. So anything that is related to the first-person experience that isn't needed in S42 is not necessarily been deprioritized, but basically all the S42 tasks in order to finish that off have been brought to the forefront, to really make sure that those are getting to the quality and level that we need and can have the iteration time associated with it.
Right. All right. I see a lot of folks asking about the PU roadmap update. That's not necessarily a question for Todd, but I do have the answer for that myself. Later today, you're going to see an update to the Squadron 42 roadmap. So keep your eye out for that. There will not be an update to the PU roadmap today, but we are aiming for a large update to the PU roadmap next Friday. We want to get to quarter 3 and quarter 4, which is 3.7 and 3.8 onto the roadmap next week, next Friday. So Squadron 42 today, PU next Friday. Tell your friends. All right, what else do we got? Oh, from the live chat, will there be explorable caves in the PU someday?
We've been doing some prototyping on that. So one of our guys here in Frankfurt has been doing some very, very early prototypes and seeing how we can build that from a modular standpoint, and then design and art will have kind of a powwow sync next week and see, are there certain no-nos to kind of stay away from, if you get the ravines or, kind of visual language of, can you get lost, in these things? And right now the answer is yes. You can very much get lost.
You did.
Yeah.
Yes, you could get lost.
So, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It really is just going to be us going through a little bit more R&D, on that and figuring out what works, what doesn't work, and then seeing, okay, what are the different tile sets that we need to create? Rock, ice, magma, whatever. So.
Right. Yeah, and actually, the caves thing is a good segue for me to talk about a little bit about what we show on ATV and what we don't show. We were looking at it. We've been testing these cave things internally and doing them on internal reviews. Those things will eventually, we will have an ATV segment where we explore that, just like we have as an ATV on every other segment. But sometimes we want to make sure a system is. I guess the word Todd used was validated. We want to validate things a little bit more. Make sure it actually has that approach is actually has a really good chance at being the approach that we actually implement into the game. There's always no guarantee in game development. We all know my favorite phrase is the only constant in game development is change. But we do try to balance that with our own interpretations and belief that, yeah, this seems like a good idea. This seems like what we're going to be doing, what we're going to be trying right now. So when we know a little bit more about that, we got some cool stuff to show you.
Yeah, I think it looks very promising, and then from there it's figuring out metrics, like how does it look like you can actually jump up there, and then you actually can jump up there. What are things that happen with the AI in there? What are what if you take a vehicle in there? What happens if there's water, in the cave? Do you transition and swim? What happens, if you drown? So on and so forth. Like all these systems that we just kind of walk through in our minds that a lot of times the artists, they don't think about it the same way that we do. And so there is that back and forth that happens. And then at that point in time, I think we're ready to reveal something.
Yeah. What can you tell us about the radar and scanning improvements coming with Alpha 3.5?
Actually, I don't know. I haven't looked at that part. I would have to sync up with Kirk.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Kirk's team here. Yeah. I wasn't sure when I asked it. It was voted up, so I was like, oh, that's really a Kirk question.
Well, for me, I think one of the main things was getting so that you can scan stations. You can scan other things, that are in the world, like that we want to create these nodes on. And I can't remember if that's 3.5 or 3.6. So yeah, I'm sorry.
That's right. One of the things we know coming in Alpha 3.5 are the Reliant variants. This person is asking if the Reliant Mako will have if the camera mount will be functional in 3.5 or not.
No. Well, we can do a remote turret, so a remote view, but as far as it's
recording, broadcasting,
no, that will not be ready. But there's absolutely no reason why the remote view will not work.
Could be interesting. Okay. Somebody wants to know if we can have Hawaii and Tiki shirts as clothing options. That seems like a question for Josh Herman.
I vote yes. And Magnum PI stashes. Yes. And hair, like chest hair, like voluminous.
Just straight Magnum PI as a mission.
Voluminous chest hair kind of thing.
Yeah. I want to ask Josh. I'm going to ask Josh Herman about that.
Yeah. And also deep V shirts.
Tyler sent me a note, says, I promise this one is not from me. I'll give you a little behind-the-scenes RTV stuff here. Tyler Wicken is almost always the person who's pulling the questions from the various chats and sending them to me. And every once in a while, he will slip in a question that he wants to know that he claims is from you guys. And usually I can spot it when it happens. And he claims that that one is not from him, but I think he's not being entirely truthful with me, which is fine. All right. What can you tell us about the current status on item insurance? Have we started talking about item insurance? This isn't on the 3.5 roadmap, so this question is pretty far out, but it did receive a lot of votes, so I wanted to see.
Yeah, we've started internal discussions on it, and so we haven't nailed down anything how it would work, but we do see it as being very, very valid. And then it would be obviously working out. Obviously, we always want time associated with things. So like you do kind of have to pay a price in one way or the other of you losing that object, but obviously versus it being completely removed from your inventory, I'm just paying the price of getting it back, and that price is time.
Yeah, it's important I think it's important to remember that things like LTI or the 6-month insurance or the 12-month insurance or the 72-month insurance that you got on your pledge is for the hull of the ship and the default equipment that come. As of yet, there has not been any implementation of item insurance.
Correct.
So I can attest from playing the game myself and watching many Twitch streams and YouTube videos that lots of folks are exhausted with constantly losing their items when they die and having to rebuy them.
Yeah.
So.
And a lot of times we know it's not the player's fault, and that to me is the biggest part. Is sometimes the game crashes, sometimes the server crashes, or the ship randomly blows up sometimes every now and then. So there's aspects, since we're in development, like we don't want to punish the players too much, but we're still trying to work out, obviously that magic middle ground of, you want to think about, you don't always want the answer to be, let me engage all the time. It's, should I engage, or should I possibly run away? Should I go stealth? Like, we want these other gameplay choices for the player to make, but right now, a lot of times the player might not have enough information. And that to me is, once we get, scanning and radar and, the heat signatures and the power and all of those things working so that you understand how much am I flashing my ass, out into the universe, versus, this other person that I see, and understanding their loadout compared to my loadout. Like that's a lot of kind of gameplay aspects and understanding, do I want to engage? And I think having the insurance so that in case you made a bad choice, it's not so damaging, to the play experience.
How much of my ass am I flashing to the universe? Todd Papy, 2019.
Sorry.
No, I like it. I like it. All right, let's see. We know about Area 18. This is a bit pie in the sky here. Are we still planning additional landing zones to ArcCorp? In the lore, we've talked about Area 17, Area 19. Stuff like that. Obviously not for 3.5, but I mean, are there still discussions? ArcCorp's not going to have one landing zone for all time, right?
Correct. And so I think this goes to what we would consider kind of secondary points of interest around planets. Those are planned. Those are talked about. So, and then it would be, for example, like Hurston. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, do we create where, the family retreats to? So like, I don't want to say they're Camp David or something like that, but basically their vacation home. Mm-hmm. The other one that we've talked about internally that we would love to get, but we need to just see time and resources, is Hurston weapons testing ground. So this is where they test all the weapons, and but it's a biome that would be specific to that location. And so there's those types of things in the plan, and it's just going to be balancing the going back and revisiting old planets and planets that we've released, and obviously the planets that we need to create. So right now the focus is on getting the first iterations out of New Babbage, Horizon, Area 18, and basically fleshing out the system,
Right.
and getting all those key pieces in place, and then the talk is to go to the next station or the next solar system, or do we actually go through and flesh those out a little bit more, or do we split up the team and kind of do half and half? Like,
Right.
Those are always the internal discussions that we do.
Okay. One of the questions that came into the chat, in the live chat, everything that we've seen of ArcCorp so far, and we've by no means seen the entire surface of a planet, but everything that we've seen of ArcCorp so far is flat. Are there mountains on ArcCorp? I mean, before they built all these man-made structures, was it a
No.
perfectly flat planet, or?
It's basically been terraformed. It's flat.
Okay.
The way that we do buildings, like we do have, the concept of ravines and those types of things, but it is covered in man-made objects.
Okay. So there's not going to be a point where we go to ArcCorp and the buildings start going up a mountain or a hill or anything.
Not that I've seen or noticed. So it's basically it's built out of plates, and everything is kind of built off of those plates.
Well, hey, when you're a big company like ArcCorp and you buy an entire planet, you get to do with it what you want. At least that's my view on it. Okay. Can you tell us anything about the future of criminality and law? Is that going to change at all in 3.5 or?
Well, we might see the first iteration. So the guy is working on it just finished the TDD, and so we're I'm assuming that will be signed off in the next week. Mm-hmm. So at that point in time, real work will be made towards that, and then there's. But the thing is regarding the way that we work in particular for internal releases, we usually have a feature cutoff of about a month before we do a release, anywhere between 6 months or 6 weeks to a month before we do a release. And so if the feature's not ready at that time, we don't want to put it out, and that's why you see some things slip, some things are held back, to a next release. Is just because when we play it, it doesn't live up to the standard, or it's not fully implemented the way that it needs to be. And so we'll need to see how much work is able to be done on that, and then from there, it's basically just putting it into our soul editor, making sure that we have the different planets basically tagged. Mm-hmm. So meaning the law at Hurston might be the law different than the law at Horizon versus Area 18 kind of thing. So, and just because you're dealing with different security forces, that's something we need to work out internally. But I think that you'll see the first iterations, maybe 3.5, definitely 3.6. Cool.
We do lots of internal play tests here, and when new folks come on board, when they onboard, they spend a lot of their first week or 2 weeks, 3 weeks playing the game, to become familiar with it, before they get started in their position. And we had somebody in here last week or the week before, I think it was the week before, who was playing Star Citizen for the first time. They had just started, and they had gotten their criminal. They had gotten most wanted, and they had to go to Korea for the first time to try to lower
to clear it. Yeah, and so I think at least in speaking with Tony, like there's bounty hunter things that we want to obviously create for that, and then later on there's the prison / jail gameplay that we want to create, and I'm sure we'll do a release of that. Later on.
Yeah. What I was getting at is just for a good 6 hours of the day, we just kept hearing what Spock would refer to as colorful metaphors coming from this office down the hall, while the person continuously tried to reduce their criminality in Korea.
Yeah.
And the fine players of the Star System Persistent Universe had no interest in allowing him. So it was quite funny to try to do your work while this shouting is going on there. So
Yeah, and we know that there's other, like Hurston needs, something like that in their area. Same with the ArcCorp. It shouldn't just only be Korea. And right now, Korea is a certain way of doing it versus, that's kind of what Rudo and some of the mission givers in Grim Hex were really built for, was to basically hack and reduce your crime rating. So there will be other ways of reducing it. It's just we're not ready to unveil those yet.
Yeah. Here's another question from the live chat. This one comes up quite often. Missiles. When are they going to be fixed?
Well, Tomas has been working on them. So I mean, it's just going to be a constant iteration. So.
Yeah.
And then from a high level perspective, it's making sure that, they're tuned and they're balanced right. So, but as far as like collision and getting the funky collisions go, like I know that Thomas has been working very hard on getting a lot of that stuff fixed.
Does the new flight model affect the way missiles operate at all?
Some. I mean, it's just going through, and again with the new flight model, a lot of that was for tuning, was for scalability, So, but again, all we're talking about is just a forward thrust, and how fast that thing can actually turn. So.
Yep.
Maybe there might be number differences, but I mean, for the most part, I don't think there's something that's so tangibly noticeable that you're like, oh, that's really different right there.
Right. One of the big features, or I shouldn't say big, but one of the exciting features anyway for Alpha 35 is the enhanced ship customization coming online with the Origin 300 series. Is there anything about that we're ready to share? Or?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what I can say and what I can't say on that. So, so I won't say anything.
It's fair enough. I got halfway through the question and I realized that we haven't actually been weapons free on that one yet. It's still in active. What I can tell you guys is it's still in active development. I had a meeting with the folks at Turbulent. Well, I didn't have a meeting, but I got to sit in on a meeting with the folks at Turbulent a couple days ago. It's pretty cool for a Tier 0 implementation. Rest assured, obviously, when it's ready to be shown, we'll show it. I show everything, don't I?
Yeah, but here's something I think we can talk about.
Okay.
And so basically right now, the way that we've been putting our ships together, so for example, we have the bare minimum, item attachments, for everything. And one of the things going forward, and it will be first seen with the 300 is basically, if you think about the 350, okay, well, that will have some other item slots that theoretically the player could put, what they want on there, or at least they have a choice of a few different options that they can put on there. And right now we don't have that in the game, but that's where we're moving to. And so then versus, let's say the 300, base model doesn't have those, but the 315 has one versus 325 has maybe two, and 350 has, 3 or 4 kind of thing. So that's the way that we're adjusting the customizable ships and.
Yeah. You'll hear more about that as we get closer to the release.
Yeah.
The release of 3.5 is scheduled for the end of Q1. We just crossed the 1/3 mark of Q1, so it's still a bit too early to have confirmed details for you. So when we do.
And a lot of the features, once we get closer to what we consider feature lock, we really start seeing what's being locked in, what's not being locked in.
Yeah.
And then obviously going back to the ship customization thing, it's at that point in time, it's rolling it out to all the ships, making sure that from item port standpoint, we have those empty item ports, we'll take different, what we consider customizable items, whether that be, let's say, an extra radar or an extra cooler or an extra power plant, and then it's up to the player to pick and choose how they want to customize their ship.
Next question says, will you be my Valentine? That one almost certainly came from Tyler.
Okay. Maybe, Tyler.
Yes.
I'll give you a straight up maybe.
I think he's asking me. I don't know. Are you asking me or are you asking Todd, Tyler? What's the status of non-lethal capture mechanics? We get this quite a bit. Bounty hunting is one of those. Well, ever since Empire Strikes Back, everybody's been on bounty hunting. We've talked about stun settings. We've talked about a lot of things. What can you tell us? Anything at all?
We have it planned. Basically, right now, what we are focusing on is getting our different ammo types working. So, for example, like a tachyon or gamma or incendiary. So we're focused on getting these aspects working, and then from there, there's the gadgets, there's the grenades, there's the non-lethal aspects, but then there's also the player aspects. So being knocked out and figuring out what that actually means. So as a player, am I just seeing a black screen? And then at that point in time, I choose to basically leave my body and respawn, or do I sit there, and wait to come to? And so it's these
See if
things
there's a chance to escape.
Yeah, exactly. So these are the aspects that I think we need to figure out and play around with a little bit from an internal standpoint. But that is, we are very aware of the non-lethal actions and being able to subdue somebody, and it's something that we do want, and we will be building.
Tyler has made it very clear he was asking you and not me.
Still maybe, Tyler.
Forever alone, Lando.
Yeah. If if Tyler comes and paints my room green, like he painted the wall in his office, then maybe.
You want a green screen?
Just for fun.
Yeah. One of the questions that came in the chat says, will there be an episode of Calling All Devs on Monday? There will not be an episode of Calling All Devs. Let's since it came through, let's take a minute to talk about that. If you follow the project for any period of time, you know that we change things up pretty regularly, usually with the start of every new year. Last year's big additions were Calling All Devs and the new Reverse the Verse Live. The year before that, we were doing Happy Hour and Citizens of the Stars. Before that, we did 10 for the Chairman and Bug Smashers and Lore Makers and stuff like that. We are still in the process of doing our evaluation of all our video content, expanding stuff like that. It was delayed somewhat by me taking 30 days off. But one of the things that I think right now is that we have a question and answer show. We're doing it right now. To have two question and answer shows seems kind of repetitive and redundant. So I think what I'm going to look at is finding a way to get what Calling All Devs gave us, which was the ability to reach out to individual developers one-off without forcing them to spend an hour on a Friday here doing this, and see if we can't roll it into this show somehow. So that way this becomes an all-in-one community question thing. I don't have a plan or a timetable for that yet. Everything's prioritized. But yeah, so for the foreseeable future, no Calling All Devs on Monday. But we're going to try to move something into this block here to do that. I think that's probably where we're going with that. What else do we got here? We talked about group improvements. In addition to the Mako, I assume the answer for the Reliant Sen is the same. Sen research gameplay, stuff like that. When that Sen comes online, any associated science or research gameplay with that?
No.
For 3.5? Yeah.
Not for 3.5.
Yeah. Sometimes the ship development is not in line with the game system development. Yeah.
The feature development.
Yeah. Every pilot of a reclaimer knows how that is. So, let's see. For cargo traders, What are the gameplay reasons to visit the trade terminals at the flagship landing zones like Laurelville or 18 when it's currently significantly quicker to visit terminals at outposts or orbiting stations? Basically, they're saying, why should we go all the way into a landing zone when we can get much of the same stuff quicker, rest stops and stuff?
We will be doing an adjustment, to basically the way the TDDs work, and then once refineries come online, the idea would be that the TDDs is where you'd go for the commodities, and you'd go for basically being able to purchase refined goods and those types of things. For refineries, that's where you'd go and sell your refined goods, and then from there, in the future, the idea would be that you can process it and then take it somewhere else and sell it. In the short term, I think the way that we'll adjust it is basically the refineries, you sell the unrefined goods and you can buy refined goods and take them to other places. Obviously, with outposts and those aspects, that would be that you're selling unrefined goods. Unless it's a mining outpost, then you're actually buying refined goods, and that's just a different way. So we will be doing a sweep through that. Rob Reiniger and I are very aware of it, and in particular, like once Area 18 goes in, we want to be able to create a triangle of gameplay. So for example, our corp needs certain things that Hurston doesn't need, or is Hurston's willing to sell, and same with basically the Crusader area. So, basically creating a triangle that the players need to travel between, and then obviously when New Babbage goes in, and with Microtech, then that will create our fourth stop, and then once we create those jump points, then each one of those solar systems on the other side of that jump point will be requesting different things as well.
I get you. We had a couple questions in various forms about economy. The economy is a major part of a lot of massively multiplayer online games, and I know many of our players who are less combat oriented, for instance, are anxiously awaiting more economy, for lack of a better term, to be added to the game. More economy gameplay, more game systems that they can utilize and exploit if they so desire.
Yeah, I mean, we know that we're missing black markets. That to me is one of the major ones that we want to be able to get in, so that when you're a pirate, you can go somewhere and you can sell, your used bloody goods that you've ripped from somebody's corpse, kind of thing. So, and then there's just basically getting the stores flushed out more. Obviously, having sinks, money sinks in the economy, so that your UEC actually gets used up. And I mean, we talked a little bit about that with like the insurance or even like our item upgrades, or our item wear and tear, and basically having to repair those types of things. So having those UEE sinks, to basically pull money out of the economy. So if there was something specific that they were looking for versus just general economy things, like we know we're doing a lot of work for that, and maybe that's something that Tony can pontificate on if you ever get him on.
Yeah, it's not that everybody doesn't love Widow, just
yeah. Well, no, but
man can't live on Widow alone.
Yeah,
Some
but I mean, we understand, why people are gravitating towards Jumptown, and it's basically uniting. It's a way of uniting people, and in particular with the real estate that we have right now, and 50 people per server, like there's no real way of uniting people, and I think sometimes space can feel very, very empty. So. And then obviously with some of the lack of AI, to basically engage, like I completely understand why people are doing this, and I actually applaud, whoever started it the first time. So it's fantastic.
You mentioned that space can feel empty. One of the questions that was voted up was an update. Is there an update on our plan for increasing player counts on instances?
Not right now. I mean, I know that we have a discussion with Clive regarding shards soon, and other aspects regarding the server meshing. aspects soon. So I don't know exactly how that's going to impact the way that we design, the way that we build. So I think that's the first iteration. Obviously, making sure that the server is running and solid enough is another iteration to make sure that we can actually increase these accounts. There's some code that I know Chris Roberts actually needs to check in that will make the ships cheaper to run. Poke, Chris.
Can I? Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason I laugh, the reason I laugh is because it's one of the never-ending joys of my job is, it's late at night or whatever, and we've got Teams chat up, and I'll watch Chris doing check-ins, on a side monitor, and when I'm like, oh, and it's just one of those things like, yep, Chris is up coding.
Yeah.
Chris is up coding.
Yeah. I mean, I think in particular, like Chris and Tony, I'll get emails from them, 8 or 9 o'clock my time, so they're up super late. And then I know that's, I've had meetings where I'm up super late and they're, they're in the middle of the day.
Yeah, I know one of the other things that we're doing to improve performance, and one of the things that will be a step towards getting more people in is reducing the amount of draw calls on the player characters. For instance, like right now, our player characters are anywhere from 8 to 15 draw calls because of all the different armor patches and whatever. And we're working on an optimization system using layer blends to reduce the player draw calls down considerably.
But like right now, the ships, they update constantly. Like each item attachment updates constantly, and that's the code that Chris is checking in. So it would the update would only happen when something is basically changing on that. So that there's a state update, and so I think once that goes in, the draw calls of the ships go down as well.
All right.
Or not the draw calls, but the actual cycling update of the physics and everything like that.
The physics thread is probably for some, a lack of education is our El Guapo. For us, it's the physics thread.
Yeah.
And if you get that reference, kudos to you. Originally, it was said that the elevators in the game would eventually be replaced with physical elevators rather than teleporters. Is this still the current plan? And if so, how do you intend to have them work with such long distances between elevators and hangars, like in Lorville?
So it will really depend on the elevator system. So basically, if it can be done in a realistic way, Chris wants it done in a realistic way, and so that there's a sense of travel. Now, there's been aspects of, let's say you have a super long space station and you get into an elevator here, and then we warp you to a section here, and then you see basically it's an establishing shot of, oh, okay, that's the landing pad that I just landed on, and then you get to the end of that, it warps you to another section, and then it's opened up again and you see outside. So you get a sense of travel. And then there's some cases that we just can't do physically. So it really depends on how it's built. But I mean, for the most part, like if it can be built physically, Chris wants it done that way. You can see that with the trains in Lorville, and it's the same thing with ArcCorp. There's that sense of time, that sense of progression that happens when you're going through a level.
Yeah. No, very, very much so. I think I said it once before. Lorville didn't become real to me until I rode the train. It was somehow, it was seeing it through the windows of a train. It was like I needed something between me and it for it to seem real. Or to me. Yeah. I don't know what that is. I think it's an experience that I can relate to taking the metro, to work or whatever. It was those kind of experiences are important.
Yeah, they are, and I think it's also trying to find the fine line, of how, it's not a full life complete simulator, meaning I don't I don't want to wait 9 minutes for a train,
Right,
you know.
right.
So I think it's finding the fine line of, you know, what we feel is valid, and you know, does that mean that we need to build something on the track so that we can actually increase the amount of trains that happen there? Is it that we make the train move faster, you know, to cut down that time? So these are all balance, basically like game/reality balances that we have to deal with. And I mean, I think players see it now. Like when you're talking about Port Alisar, you know, obviously getting out of your bed, getting to your ship, getting, you know, into it and flying off versus the real world time scale of doing it in Lorville. Like there's a certain amount of time sink that happens with Lorville that, you know, we look for. And Fred and QA will actually be looking at different ways that we can shorten it without it being, without the reality, taking the reality away.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, you know, a long and drawn out train ride or an elevator ride is cool the first time, the second time,
Yeah.
the third time. You think, wow, this is just like real life or whatnot. But on the 400th time, the 500th time,
Yeah.
you just.
Yeah, I mean, for example, like the get out of bed animations, like
Just
Bender
get up
and
already.
Bender and I have talked about it, and we do have quicker bed animations, and so getting those switched out and all of that, like it's, you know, but that's something that the player experiences over and over and over again, and part of that is basically finding the fine line of, again, what's real versus, you know, kind of snappy gameplay.
We are almost out of time. We got time for just one or two more questions here. Currently, we can't use mobiGlass and move around at the same time. Are there any plans to adjust that? I'm trying to figure out what it would look like walking around like
Yeah.
this. Like, do you just walk into walls then, or?
It's if they could send through why they feel it's important to do that, I would equate it to like people walking around on a phone and you wanting to go and kind of smack the phone out of the person's hand because they're getting in the way or they're walking slower, or like from a gameplay standpoint, it's what does it really gain us, you know? And is it just if it's just to save a little time here and there, it would have to be you know, kind of a big enough thing to really warrant that, just because the way that we do the mobiGlass to make it legible, and so we darken the background and you know, we do these not necessarily fakes, but basically the way that we focus things, and like I said, with the darkening of the background, so you can actually read it. Like you're just gonna be walking into a wall.
Yeah, games like Sea of Thieves do it pretty well. You're able to, they bring up the map and you can only see the outside around the edges. And it's very much like you walking around with a map kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's something
But again,
to talk about.
what does it gain us compared to us focusing on something else? Like,
Yeah.
That to me is going to be always what we, you know, weigh it up against.
Yeah. Somebody start the conversation on Spectrum. Let's have the conversation.
Yeah.
Do that. All right, one more. Let's see. What else do we got? I guess for our final question of the show, are weapon attachments on their way? Extended mags, scopes, being able to customize out our kit.
Yes. So, and that's something I think you'll see this year. So after the ammo stuff, like there was the grenade gadgets, but it's also that also includes attachments. So being able to, right now I think we have 4 points of customization, meaning under barrel, barrel, sights, and mags.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, that's it. That wraps up this week's Reverse the Verse Live. Thank you so much, Todd, for taking the time out of your day to be here. I know it's late for you.
My pleasure. It's not too late.
That's right. You got a meeting after this, don't you?
Yeah.
Yep.
I get to go talk about Star Marine and Arena Commander. So. with Sean and Chris. And,
yeah, you say that after I said last question, so I can't answer any more questions about it. We'll get to, we'll have you talk more about that next time then. Okay. For those of you who joined late or missed, we made a couple announcements during the show. Squadron, let me just remember them right off the bat. Squadron 42 roadmap update coming later today. PU roadmap update with 3.7 and 3.8. We are shooting for next Friday to have that for you. That is our goal. I'm by no means going to sit here and guarantee it or anything, but that is our target for next Friday, 3.7 and 3.8 on the public roadmap there, as well as whatever changes to 3.5 and 3.6 occur when roadmap updates happen. There is a Cyclone contest going on right now. You've got about another week to submit your entries. ATV started with JJ's version of the Cyclone commercial. I'm pretty sure you guys can do better. I'd like to see that. We've also calling all devs. No calling all devs on Monday. No calling all devs for the foreseeable future. We're going to try to figure something else out, work it into here, because it seems like I'd rather have a one-stop shop for all your community questions. So we'll figure that out as time goes on. And was there anything else? I think that was it. Oh, I saw a bunch of questions about when the next concept thing is. I don't know. I don't know. I didn't want to ignore it. I saw a bunch of questions in the chat about when the next concept. I don't have that information. Soon, TM? I don't know. So for I almost signed off calling all devs because I said calling all devs. For Reverse the Verse Live, I am content manager for global video production, Jared Huckabee. That's Star Citizen Live game director, Todd Papy. We will see you next week, everybody. Take care.
Woohoo!
Woohoo!
Thanks for watching. For the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42, you can subscribe to our channel, or you can check out some of the other shows, and you can also head to our website at www.robertsspaceindustries.com. Thank you very much for watching.